Hello everyone, I'm Brian, welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue.
Now, so Shankaracharya came in and he wrote his commentary. You need to expand on these sutras and explain them. So Shankaracharya explained it. It's called Shankaracharya's commentary, Brahma Sutra Bhashya or Vedanta Sutra Bhashya. Another name is Shariraka Sutras, Shariraka Sutra Bhashya. Another name is Uttara Mimamsa. Purva Mimamsa means the earlier inquiry into the earlier portion of the Vedas. Uttara Mimamsa means an inquiry into the later portion of the Vedas. The last portion. Last portion is Upanishads. And Shankara, in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras, gave a non-dualistic interpretation to Vedanta. And therefore, this is the Shankara's commentary on the Brahma Sutras is the philosophical basis of our school that bears repetition. Shankara's commentary is very important, philosophically speaking. So philosophically, you need to refer, if you have questions, you need to refer back to Shankara's commentary on the Brahma Sutras. That is the Advaitic, non-dual interpretation, the non-dual school, our school. But that's not the only school. Along comes Ramanujacharya, a couple of hundred years after Shankara. And he gives a different interpretation of the same text, the same Brahma Sutras. And he writes this commentary called the Sri Bhashya, where he rejects Shankara's non-dualistic interpretation and gives what is called a qualified monistic interpretation, Vishishtadvaita.
And this is what I was talking about in the last video, is the fact that, they say this is the logical explanation for it, but then yet here you have two people who have different interpretations of the Upanishads, the last part of the Vedas. But I mean, it's very, I don't know what to say honestly, other than the fact that, again, it goes back to what Swami Tadamananda has said, which is what he claimed to have done, which is to learn, I believe he learned Sanskrit. He went back to India to read the original the Vedas. I don't know if he can. I mean, this is probably some ancient text that might be like very, very fragile. I don't know if they've rewritten it. I'm sure they have, to preserve the original copy and let people read the rewritten version of it. That way, it won't damage the original. Probably. Again, I don't know, but I'd assume so. You want people to read the original text without reading the original text, which is seems counterintuitive. But yeah, and the best thing to do is to, if you can, either you go and read it yourself and interpret it yourself, and then go to a school that has your similar values, or you can listen to all the schools, find out which one seems to agree with what you seems to agree with. So whatever pulls you towards that school, whatever you tend to agree with more, apply yourself in that school. But to give every school a chance, you don't just stop and you say, oh, this one sounds pretty good, let me stop here. There might be a better one out there.
So he's the master interpreter for Vishishtadvaita. See, these masters were called acharyas. The masters, to be an acharya in that sense, you have to write an interpretation, a commentary on the Brahma Sutras. That was the technical meaning of acharya. Any spiritual teacher is called an acharya.
Acharya Prashant? So that's not his name? Is that his title? Is that actually his name then?
Teacher. But
or
really,
teacher,
in Vedanta,
the
original acharyas are those who wrote commentaries, who were at the source of each of these schools. So Shankara is the acharya for the Advaita Vedanta system, Shankaracharya. He wrote the non-dualistic interpretation of Vedanta Sutras. Ramanuja is the acharya for the qualified monistic or Vishishtadvaitic system. He wrote the Sri Bhashya, the commentary, interpreting the same Brahma Sutras in accordance with Vishishtadvaita philosophy. Along came Madhvacharya, and he gave a dualistic interpretation of the same Brahma Sutras. He wrote what is called the Purna Pragya Bhashya, another commentary interpreting in a dualistic way. And then there were others also, well-known system builders. All of them, they were the head of, the source of the system, not the systems themselves, but the commentaries, the interpretation of the Brahma Sutras. Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva. Then comes Nimbarkacharya, who wrote the commentary, which becomes the basis for the Dvaita system. Then comes Vallabhacharya, who wrote a commentary on the Brahma Sutras, which becomes the basis, commentarial basis for the Shuddha system. Then there comes Baladeva Acharya, who wrote a commentary called the Govinda Bhashya, which becomes the commentarial basis for the system of Achintya Bheda Veda Vedanta, which is the philosophical basis for the ISKCON, for the Hare Krishnas, for example. So all of these texts are there. And
real quick, sorry. So yeah, I'm assuming all these comment that he's saying is all from the Upanishads, the last few texts, all the different interpretations of it. So that's very interesting. Well, I don't want to ask what everyone's following. I don't know if there's going to be conflict in the comments, but I just listen. Advaita Vedanta seems to be very much what I tend to follow, maybe even somewhat of Buddhism, but as of late, it doesn't seem so much into Buddhism, although it was the first thing that changed my way of thinking about life. About, again, I repeat, that life is suffering, and give 110% and expect nothing from the results. And the life is suffering portion kind of just encompasses everything, including the give 110%. Because, if you do something, you could end up suffering from that, or you do suffer from that, and then regardless of what the result is, you suffered for it. So expectation of suffering kind of was already implanted ever since that the quote life is suffering. But obviously, was it the fourth noble truth, fourth or fifth? There is a way out of the suffering.
Each of these commentaries has sub-commentaries and sub-commentaries. So multiple. For example, in the Advaita Vedanta system, there are many texts. All right, so this gives you a background of what are we talking about, the text which we are talking about. We are concerned here with the Brahma Sutras and Shankara's commentary on the Brahma Sutras. Now, the Shankara, in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras, instead of starting as is the practice, start with the first sutra and start explaining it. Instead of that, he starts with a preliminary, an introductory essay. This essay is called Adhyasa Bhashya, the commentary on superimposition. Adhyasa, superimposition. Bhashya, commentary. Superimposition here, what does superimposition mean? So literally the Sanskrit word Adhyasa, it can be split into two parts. Adhyasa. Adhi means on top of. Asa means to put. So to put on top of, to put something on top of the other. But remember, it's not literally putting something on top of the other. It's not putting a book on top of a table or something like that. It's rather mistaking one thing for another. So there's a rope, the classic example, and we don't know the rope as a rope, but we know it, we make a mistake and we think it's a snake. Now that's the case of superimposition. It's not imposition, when you put something on the other. It's not that there's really a rope and there's really a snake and you put that poor snake on top of a rope. There's a funny story about non-dualists and their snakes and ropes. This man went to a non-dualist school of monks discussing Vedanta. Then he came back to his village and they asked him, what do you see there? Oh, it's a good ashram and the monks, they study Vedanta, but they have a problem in that ashram. They have a problem in the monastery. What's the problem? They have a problem with snakes. There's this snake which gets on top of a rope and they have to somehow drive it away. And next day it's again on top of the rope. And thus it goes. Well, there's not really a snake. Superimposition means mistaking one thing for the other. Something that is not there appears there. It's a rope. There's no snake there, but we mistake it for a snake. It is God alone, Brahman alone. It's existence, consciousness, bliss, this entire universe. We mistake it for a physical, external universe and ourselves for little physical body, mind. So physical universe, we are body, mind, experiencing a physical universe, living in the middle of a vast, separate physical universe. This is the snake. What's the rope? What's the reality? It's Brahman. It's existence, consciousness, bliss, and you are that existence, consciousness, bliss. So this is superimposition, an error, a mistake. The mistake is a very nice word. To take things as they are is the truth. To mistake things is superimposition. To take a rope as a rope is the truth. To mistake a rope for a snake is an error.
I do wonder what Swami here would think if I were to give him the word misunderstand. I wonder if that would be better. I don't know. Mistake or misunderstand.
To see Brahman everywhere, to realize that it is Brahman, I am Brahman, and this is one unlimited existence, consciousness, bliss, though it appears differently, that is truth. But to think, not to see Brahman, not to realize it's Brahman, but to see that we are all limited mortal creatures, and here is a vast physical universe, and that's it. This is an error. This is called mistake, and this is adhyasa or superimposition.
The only reason why I have a feeling he would say their mistake and misunderstanding probably could be interchangeable, but I'm wondering in terms of at least understanding the concept of Brahman and world, because it's hard to, like I see a cup, or I see a cup. How am I mistaking this cup? It's clearly a cup. But then misunderstanding could be interpreted a different way. It's like, well, no, you're misunderstanding it. Misunderstanding it. I don't know. I guess it all depends on the person. All depends on the person. I've liked the word misunderstanding because misunderstanding as in we think the universe is real when it's not. It's not necessarily a mistake, it's a misunderstanding. It is real to a degree in terms of objective reality, but it's not absolute reality. I guess that's the reason why I say a misunderstanding as opposed to again, probably interchangeable.
Where does this come in? Why? For that, let's take a quick look at the 4 sutras. I mentioned the 4 sutras, so if you are going to study the Vedanta Sutra, Brahma Sutras, at least the 4 sutras. So today we'll take a quick look at the 4 sutras and we'll make a beginning with the Adhyasa Bhashya. First, the 4 sutras. And it's easily stated. The first sutra is Athato Brahma Jigyasa. What does that mean? Hence, therefore, inquiry into Brahman. Atha means hence, Atha means therefore, Brahman, the ultimate reality, Jigyasa, desire to know. Athato Brahma Jigyasa, hence, therefore, inquiry into Brahman. But what does that mean? What is hence, and what is therefore, and what is Brahman, and what is this inquiry? If you want to know all that, then you have to go into the commentary by Shankaracharya, and he writes pages after pages about that. But basically what he says this here, that's not our subject. Our subject is before this. But in order to know why he writes this introductory essay, which is so important, we have to know the context. So the meaning of the sutra is pretty simple. Hence means having gathered the qualifications necessary to be a spiritual seeker. So here comes the 4-fold qualifications of a Vedantic student. Now you can see why it's important to know a little bit of Vedanta before you jump into the Brahma Sutras. Actually, the Brahma Sutras should be studied after studying the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. So Brahma Sutras discuss what you have learned in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. Primarily the Upanishads, of course, but then Shankara in his commentary often quotes the Bhagavad Gita also. So the Gita also should be studied before the Brahma Sutras.
So I was wrong on the first one. I thought he said it summarized it and gave an explanation about the last portion. But I guess you have to read the Upanishads and the other book, the Gita, so you can understand the Brahma Sutras.
So hence means you have to have the qualifications. Once you have the qualifications of being a Vedanta student, the Viveka, the discernment of the eternal from the non-eternal, Vairagya, dispassion from the non-eternal for samsara, the 6-fold qualification, the disciplines, Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, then Samadhana, Shraddha, I'm not going to explain those. And then finally, mumukshutvam, an intense desire for freedom. Once we have that, that's the meaning of hence. So it has to be expanded into all that. Then next word is therefore. Wherefore? Why? Because, Shankara will explain, this entire samsara does not give us fulfillment. We have been trying to get fulfillment, satisfaction, find the meaning of life, find some ultimate purpose to life, overcome suffering, find happiness. None of it is working. And now we are being promised, if you are enlightened, if you are spiritual, you will get fulfillment, you will transcend suffering, you will find out the riddle of this, the answer to this question, what is this life, what's the point of it all? All of that is promised. Therefore, hence, therefore, what do I do? An inquiry into Brahman. Literally the word says jigyasa. Jigyasa means desire to know. So now desire to know cannot be an instruction. Why not? Why can't it be an instruction? It's like eating. Somebody can tell you to eat the food. That's fine. But nobody can tell you, be hungry. You can't be hungry. You either feel hungry or you don't feel hungry, but you can eat the food anyway. So nobody can tell you should desire to know Brahman. You can try to know Brahman. You can read the books and all, attend classes, but you either have the desire or you don't have it. So the meaning of this desire to know Brahman effectively translates into inquiry. In Sanskrit, vichara. Brahma jigyasa is equal to Brahma vichara. Desire to know Brahman effectively means inquire into Brahman. How do you inquire into Brahman? Again, Vedanta tells you, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Listen to it, contemplate it, meditate upon it. Listen means turn up for the classes, read the books. Contemplate means question it. Brahma Sutras are very useful here. Brahma Sutras are meant for contemplation. In fact, go back to the 4 chapters of the Brahma Sutras. One Acharya, master points out, notice the first chapter is about the meaning of the Upanishadic verses, to get a coherent message out of it. Samanvaya. So it is Shravana. It is based on hearing. It's based on your study of the Upanishads. The Brahma Sutra first chapter depends on knowing about Brahman. Then reading, studying, etc. The second chapter of the Brahma Sutras is Avirodha, debates, arguments. It is Manana. It's based on contemplation, reasoning, the second part of the Vedantic process. The third chapter is Sadhana, practice, and a part of that is meditation. So it is Nididhyasana. Third chapter is Nididhyasana, based on Nididhyasana. Fourth chapter is Phala, result, which is Brahma Sakshatkara, the direct realization of Brahman, leading to moksha, liberation. So all of Brahman is actually, all of Vedanta is actually there in the 4 chapters that way. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Anyway, back to our inquiry. So inquiry into Brahman means vichara, inquiry. It means Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. All right. This is in brief the meaning of the first sutra. But again, this is oversimplified. I'm just presenting to you what will take a few classes to explain if you take Shankara's commentary. Now another question arises. So each of these sutras is linked. A question arises. So inquiry into Brahman, I understand, hence, therefore, inquiry, good. But what is this Brahman? I mean, you want me to inquire into X, but what is X? You have to explain what is X, what is Brahman. So the next sutra tells us what is Brahman. Sutra number 2. Janmadhyasya yataha. Janmadhyasya yataha, it means birth, creation, etc. of the universe from which. Brahman is that from which the universe arises, in which the universe stays, into which the universe dissolves. So that's how Brahman is defined. How do you define it? They will draw. So remember, all of Brahma Sutras is basically they will draw from Upanishads. So there are different Upanishadic texts which tell you yato va imani bhutani jayante, from which all these beings have sprung, in which they all dwell, into which they dissolve at the end of time. So that is Brahman. So that is an indirect way of referring to Brahman. But anyway, that's a definition of Brahman. Our question was, what is this Brahman I'm supposed to inquire into? Answer is given in the second sutra. It is that from which this universe has sprung. It's a good definition because Brahman seems abstract to us, but the universe seems very much present to us. Here is this universe. Here I am, where all of us and everything here, where it has come from, in which it exists, and into which it will finally dissolve. In Sanskrit, Janmadyas Yasmat Janmasthiti Bhanga Tad Brahma. Asya Jagato Janmasthiti Bhanga Yasmat Tad Brahma. In Sanskrit, it means from that which this entire universe is born, in which it exists, and into which it is finally dissolved, that is Brahman. That's the definition of Brahman. Now, this is the second sutra. The third sutra will be, how do you know Brahman is the source? Well, how do you know? Because I hear the scientists are telling me Big Bang is the source of the universe, and the Sankhyans are telling me Prakriti is the source, nature is the source of the universe, and somebody telling me that God has created the universe, and so on. So this Brahman of yours, how do I know it's the source of the universe? Why are you saying so? On what authority? Then the third sutra says, Shastra Yonitvat, from the source known as the Shastra, the scriptures. So again, all of these are dwelling on Upanishadic texts. The Upanishads tell us Brahman is the source of the universe, and therefore Brahman should be that which is to be inquired into. So the third sutra tells us, how do I know Brahman is the source of the universe? I know it from the Upanishads. Shastra Yonitvat. At this point, someone may again ask the question, suppose I don't believe in your precious Upanishads, then second chapter for you. Second chapter is, there's a section which deals with philosophers who don't believe in the Upanishads or the Vedas. Now, at this point, another question may arise that Brahman is revealed as the source of the universe in the Upanishads. How do you know that? Because the Upanishad says so many different things. There are so many sentences in the Upanishads. And how do you know all of it tells you that Brahman is the source of the universe? And then the fourth sutra comes in. Tat tu samanvayat. Tat means this conclusion, that Brahman is the purport of the Upanishads. The word tu means as against the other views, your Big Bang view or the Prakriti view or whatever. As against those views, Brahman as the source of the Upanishads, samanvayat, by a harmonization, by finding out the purport, by a consensus of the Upanishadic texts. And here, the job of the Brahma Sutras and the commentator is to show how a variety of Upanishadic texts point to the purport. Altogether, they point to something. They're telling you something. They're telling you that Brahman is the ultimate reality. And so that's a big job. So many sutras will go, take up different Upanishadic statements and show how it all fits in. It fits together. So this fitting together is the big task that is taken up in the first chapter of the Brahma Sutras. That's why it's called Samanvaya, the harmony of the Upanishadic texts. Well and good. Congratulations. You have studied the first 4 sutras. Atato Brahma Jigyasa, hence therefore inquiry into Brahman. What is Brahman? Janmadyasya yataha, that from which the universe originates, etc. Origination, etc. of the universe is from which, that is Brahman. How do you know that? Shastra Yonitvat, from the source called the Shastras or the scriptures. But the Shastras say so many things. How do you know the Shastras say Brahman? Tattu samanvayat, Brahman is revealed as the source of the universe by a harmonization of the various sentences of the Upanishads. Okay. Well and good. So why did Shankara write an introduction on superimposition? Where does superimposition come in? We have to go back to the first sutra. The first sutra says, hence, therefore, an inquiry into Brahman. Now, an inquiry, what does an inquiry do? An inquiry gives rise to knowledge. Any kind of inquiry. I ask questions and I read a book and I think about it, I inquire, I try to find out something and I get knowledge. That's what an inquiry can do. So you're saying that knowledge of Brahman can accomplish this liberation from suffering, realization of the ultimate good. All of this can be realized by knowledge. Yes, that's what we are claiming. But then knowledge can only remove ignorance. You see, knowledge can only remove ignorance. Knowledge cannot do anything else. Knowledge can free you from a bondage Knowledge can free you from limitation, bondage, from your suffering, only if that suffering, bondage, limitation is based on ignorance. It's not a real suffering, bondage, or limitation. Rope snake example. By mistake, I see a snake and I'm scared of it. Now, the solution to this problem is to see that it's a rope. It's not a snake. The solution to this problem is not to chase that false snake around with a stick, or to call a snake charmer. No, it is to see that it's not a snake. It's actually a rope. It's an inquiry into the real nature of what appears to me, and to find out what it is, that it's a rope. That inquiry will reveal to me it's not a snake, and I'll be freed from the problem of the snake. Why did that inquiry and the knowledge of the rope help you? Because it was not a real snake. The problem was based on ignorance of the rope, and the knowledge of the rope solved the problem for me. If it had been a real snake, then any kind of knowledge wouldn't do. You still have to do something to drive away the snake, or trap the snake, or something like that, or call a snake charmer, or what have you. But since it's not a real snake, it's a product, it's a mistake. You have taken a rope to be a snake, then the thing to do is not to mistake it, to correct that mistake. And the only way a mistake can be corrected is by knowledge. And the only way the knowledge can come is through inquiry. Hence, therefore, an inquiry into Brahman. The claim, the huge, big claim is our bondage, our problems are a mistake. That you think this is a vast, uncaring universe separate from you, mistake. That you think you are a mortal body, born, aging, and going to die very soon, mistake. That you think you are this person, a mind, embodied mind, suffering ups and downs and depression and harassment and anxiety and fear for the future, mistake, big mistake. Then this mistake must be based on some kind of ignorance. Mistakes come from ignorance. So here also mistake comes from ignorance. Just as thinking it to be a snake is a mistake, it came from ignorance. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of the rope. Here, mistake of being a samsari, a jiva and trapped in samsara, comes from a mistake based on what? Ignorance. Ignorance of what? That I am Brahman. That I am Brahman. So, and therefore, knowledge of Brahman is required. That I am Brahman, this knowledge is required. This knowledge will remove my ignorance about my real nature as Brahman, and it will correct the mistake that I am a samsari, a limited sentient being, a jiva. It will correct that mistake. I will realize what I truly am, and that will solve my problems. So, this is the big question. That's why knowledge is necessary. Since knowledge is necessary, hence, therefore, an inquiry into Brahman. Now you see why this Adhyasa Bhashya is situated at the beginning of the Brahma Sutras. A question is raised. In the Brahma Sutras, you have to explain the sutras. Why is Shankara not explaining the sutras? What is this superimposition? So Shankara is preparing the stage for the first sutra. The answer to this objection is Shankara is preparing the stage for the first sutra. Why an inquiry? What good will an inquiry do? An inquiry will give rise to knowledge. So what good will knowledge do? Knowledge will remove ignorance. What ignorance, and what will that do? It will correct the mistake, the adhyasa, the superimposition, that we are not bodies and minds. We have taken ourselves to be bodies and minds. We are not limited, birth and death, happiness and misery. We are unlimited existence, consciousness, bliss. So this mistake has to be corrected. All right. This is the big claim.
Okay, I hope this is the right time to pause. And I was going to pause a little bit early to make this comment, but I figured I'd let it run. The one thing I will say, he was talking about the four, essentially the 4 chapters of the Brahma Sutra. The first 2 is very interesting. The first one is pretty, it's okay, I guess. I mean, obviously it's something to get you into it. Number 2 is the one, a little bit more interesting part. But number 3 and 4, not necessarily so much, only because from his explanation, I mean, obviously, if you want to be a brahmacharya, you have to, if I remember correctly, you have to read all 4. Or at least from his teachings, you do have to read the first 4 chapters at the very least. But anyways, number 3 sounds very much like what a lot of religions do to explain why their God or their Bible is real. Why is the Bible the truth? Because God said so. Who says God is real? The Bible does. And that's what kind of what it sounded like in number 3 to me. And let me know if I'm wrong, if I heard that wrong. But and that's the reason why he also made a comment that if you don't believe in the Upanishads or the Vedas, then you go back to number two. And that's where the logic, or the people like Buddhists, the Jains, and anyone else who don't believe in the Vedas, that's where they go to was it chapter 2 of the Brahma Sutras, which is the one I'm very much interested in, just because I want to hear how do they explain it. Number 3, to me, as far as just him simply saying it without me actually delving into it, sounds very much like what religion says. You want to know why God's real? Bible. Or, the Quran, or the whatever other, holy book is out there for their particular religion. So that's the reason why 3, not so much. But again, I would love to hear all 4, honestly. And the 4th one sounds like the biggest one, because at that point, I think that's going to prove that Brahman is the ultimate reality based on the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and what else? The Vedas. Well, I don't know if it's all of the Vedas. I know he said it was usually the last portion of the Vedas, which is the Upanishads. So it's probably going to pull a lot of resources to say these are what the Upanishads, the Gita have said to prove that Brahman is real. That's the reason why I'm not necessarily too much into those 2. Number 2 is the most interesting one to me, although I do want to listen to all of them just because I want to hear all explanations anyway. So anyways, that's at least part 2 for this one. We're going to have one more, and then the next time I react to Swami here, we'll listen to part 2. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up, thumbs down, down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.